Hello and welcome to MMA Crypt Fighting Talk. On today's show, we'll be discussing the Four Horsewomen of mixed martial arts. The Four Horsewomen faction consists of Ronda Rousey, Shayna Baszler, Jessamyn Duke, and Marina Shafir. Okay, joining me on today's show to discuss the Four Horsewomen will be Mr. Derek Love. Welcome to the show, Derek.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Okay, let's start with how the faction came to be. Now, Marina Shafir is a long-time training partner of Ronda Rousey. Now, Ronda met and coached Shayna Baszler and Jessamyn Duke on the Ultimate Fighter Season 18. So that pretty much covers how they met and joined forces. Now, let's look into the naming of the group. Now, the Four Horsemen were a long-time heel group in pro wrestling throughout the 80s and 90s. Ronda Rousey is a big pro wrestling fan, but apparently Shayna Baszler is a even bigger pro wrestling fan. Now I'm reading all the girls have moved in together, and Shayna has turned the house into a pro wrestling house, and she makes them all sit round and watch Raw every week. So now apparently Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler came up with the name Four Horsewomen. That's how the naming came to be. So we've covered how the faction came to be. And we covered how the name came to be of the Four Horsewomen. Well, give us your thoughts on the faction of the Four Horsewomen there, Derek.
Oh, I don't know if the Four Horsewomen's an appropriate name for that group. I think it should be called Ronda Rousey and the Job Squad because, 3 or 4 of those fighters, no one's even heard of them for the most part.
So you think it's basically a Ronda Rousey group? Now, come on, you've got to give Shayna Baszler some credit there. She's a pretty well-known name. I sort of get with the other two. Are you not going to give Shayna Baszler a little bit more credit there, Derek?
I'm thinking more of for modern UFC fans. Most of them have probably never heard of Shayna Baszler until Tough.
Yeah.
I knew who she was before Tough, but most people would have no idea who she was. That's why I'm thinking she's more of a no-name. It's hard to compare her to any of the Four Horsemen in wrestling if no one's ever heard of her.
Now, do you think they should have come up with their own name, Derek, instead of sort of stealing the Four Horsemen's gimmick? Because that's what they've pretty much done, in a way.
Honestly, I think nowadays with stuff like that, it's got to be so hard to be original. I think it'd be tough to come up with their own name and for not to sound totally stupid. Once they, get a little bit more popularity and stuff, the Four Horsemen would be a cool name. But right now, it doesn't even make sense. One of them's not even in the UFC. One of them's terrible. And, Shayna Baszler hasn't even fought in the UFC yet.
Well, we'll break down the women in just a moment, Derek. But for me, I like the Four Horsewomen. I think they've all got attitudes in a way. Like the Four Horsemen, they had bad attitudes. They had the swagger, cocky, ruthless. It's sort of they sort of suit the Four Horsewomen name in a way. If anyone deserves it in real fighting, it's certainly them four. Especially, I get why Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey came up with it because they're the main two with the attitude. Well, saying that though, I think all 4 of them have got their own sort of attitude. But mainly, I think Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta, they must be fucking stoked that these women had this conversation and came up with this group. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. If this is going to be something they could, market, it wouldn't be shocking during Ronda's next fight if Joe Rogan didn't mention it, especially if she has Shayna Baszler or someone cornering her.
Well, that takes me on to my next point here, Derek. Now, I want to look at what is the actual point in the group. Now, we know in pro wrestling, the whole point in the Four Horsemen, it was to, outnumber your opponent. It all started with Dusty Rhodes, I think, back in the day. They used to always jump Dusty Rhodes and outnumber him. So it sort of saved Ric Flair's title in a way. Like, we'll weaken him before he fights Ric Flair for the belt. And that worked. Now, these women train together, but at the end of the day, well, the bottom line is basically, it's just one of them getting in the cage. It's not like you can have 3 of them on one in a cage at the same time. There's only one going in that cage at that time. I get that they can all train together and they can all help each other progress and, learn this, learn that. But that's the same at every single gym. Yeah, they live together, they may support each other, they may get each other through weight cuts, that's good. So I get it in that sense. But what is the point in starting a stable in mixed martial arts? Do you think there's a place for it, Derek?
I think it's just for fun. Obviously, like you said, they can't. It's not anything like pro wrestling where a stable will actually, there's a team of guys who beat the piss out of everyone. It's more just for fun. It's me and my gang here, training partners, are the so and so's. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a lot more of this in MMA now that they've started doing it. You could always see, two guys, Jose Aldo and Renan Barao, they could be the, Demolition or whichever.
Well, we've actually got a new group called the Four Jaguars, but I'll get to that later on because I want to talk about the rivalries later with you, Derek. So that's actually another faction who's set to rival the Four Horsewomen, so we'll get to that in a little bit. Now, there is marketing. I get the marketing side. They're throwing up the four hands. It looks fucking cool. They can sell a shitload of T-shirts and merchandise. You probably get one of those big foam gloves like you used to get in wrestling. Do you like the Hulkamania glove? You probably get like a Four Horsewomen. You probably sell like teddies, fucking dolls, the full lot, Merchandise, it's awesome. As it goes for actually, in-cage action, yeah, they can help each other with the weight cuts, they can support each other, just emotionally being there. But there is one big point what they can do. They can't get in the cage at the same time. I already made that point. But what they can do, they can avenge each other's losses. Now, there's 3 of them in the same weight division. But the main person I'm looking at this benefiting is Ronda Rousey in a way. Because Ronda Rousey, it's like, oh, you have to get through my goons before you get to me. So she can stamp out the competition by her goons facing, some of these legit contenders and hopefully maybe beating them. And if they don't beat them, at least Ronda Rousey gets a good look at them, what they're good at, what they're not good at. Because obviously Ronda Rousey trains with like Shayna Baszler every single day, so she knows what Shayna Baszler's good at. Now, if Shayna Baszler takes this girl down, she controls her well in a certain position, and Ronda will know where to attack this girl then. Do you know what I mean? So it benefits Ronda Rousey mainly, in my opinion.
Absolutely, especially if Joe Silva goes along with it, and oh, girl's looking like she's getting close to a title shot. Okay, now you got to fight, Jessamyn Duke. You beat her. Okay, now you got to fight Shayna Baszler. Okay, now you get Ronda. And then Ronda's gonna, she's gonna have tape. She's gonna have people who, hands-on experience with her opponents. Work out perfectly. Now, who's to say Joe Silva isn't gonna be like, no, this is stupid. Someone's getting close to a title shot. They're not fighting Shayna Baszler because she's not even in the top 10. It could go that way too.
Well, that's a good point there, Derek. I'm hoping to touch a little bit more on that too also. Let's give some individual stats and, break them down singly. Now, Ronda Rousey, she's obviously the captain. She's the, this group will be nothing without Ronda Rousey, basically. That is the bottom line there, Derek. True?
Yeah, she is definitely the leader, we'll say. She's the champion. She is your Ric Flair.
Yeah, guarantee. Now, they are obviously copying the Four Horsemen gimmick, so what we'll do as well, we'll give our opinion on who they, mimic from the Four Horsemen. So, you saying she reminds you of Ric Flair?
I actually, honestly, Greg, I think I'm going to, say Ronda Rousey is a combination of Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and Brian Pillman.
Wow. She's
the loose cannon.
Yeah, she is. I like that one. Yeah, I do. Well, for me, I'm just going to stick to... Yeah, I'm going to stick to Ric Flair. Mainly because, Ric Flair was the champ. He had the belt for a long time. And I can see Ronda Rousey keeping that belt for a very long time. So, she's got the swagger. She's got the blonde hair. Shit, I think she's got fucking a Ric Flair wig on, to be honest with you. Yeah, she's Ric Flair, 100%. With a bit of Brian Pillman in there too. I agree. Well, let's get on to sidekick. That will be Shayna Baszler. Now, Shayna used to be friends with Misha Tate before the Ultimate Fighter Season 18, but she quickly forged a relationship with Ronda Rousey, and they became very close friends since the show. Now, my personal take here, Derek, on Shayna, I do think she's a little bit overrated. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, she's been around the block, and I said to you before, I said, you know, are we giving Shayna Baszler enough credit? Yeah, in name value, she deserves the credit because she's been around the block. She's fought some really tough fighters. She was good early on in her career, but she seems to be falling off a little bit. And she's going to lose the next UFC bout, and I think in a year or two time, if she doesn't get injured again, I think she'll be cut from the UFC. What do you think, Derek?
I agree with that. A best case scenario for her is she hangs on and just beats the kind of the low of the UFC bantamweight women's. I don't really think she'll ever, I don't even think she's the type who will win 2 fights in a row.
Well, who would you put her as at the Four Horsemen?
Well, I would call her Arn Anderson, even though I already said, Ronda reminds me of Arn Anderson, but that's just because Ronda's an ass kicker. But, yeah, Shayna Baszler's definitely Arn Anderson. She's the number 2.
I've got to go with Arn Anderson too, there, Derek. She's definitely, he was the second in command. He was like the tough little bastard. She's a tough little bitch in her own right, to be honest with you. So, she's definitely Arn Anderson. Let's move on to the next member of the Four Horsewomen. Now, she was another cast member on the Ultimate Fighter Season 18. That is, of course, Jessamyn Duke, Giraffe. She's just a tall, lanky fucking thing. She just reminds me of a giraffe here, Derek. Now, for me, Derek, she's the weakest fighter of the group. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. She is very awkward to watch fight, I would say.
Now, strangely enough, I watched the last fight, and considering she's working with Ronda Rousey and, a lot of these judo guys, she showed her a little bit of judo, but still, nowhere near polished enough. A judo actually put her in trouble. Her opponent managed to take her back and get some good scrambles out of it, to be honest with you. Like when Ronda Rousey does it, she can, it's with conviction. She slams these women down. There's no two ways about it. It's like Karol Prizier, when he used to take guys for a ride, they was going for a big ride, and they wasn't going to, scramble and take his back out of it. I just feel like, yeah, she's mainly a stand-up fighter, and not a strong one, no power, very thin frame, and she's trying to learn this judo stuff, but it's just not working out. And I just don't see her sticking around the UFC much longer, and I certainly don't see her sticking in the group for much longer. I think she'll be replaced. But if you was going to name her out of anybody, the Four Horsemen, who would you put her as?
She's Paul Roma, because she's awful and she sucks.
Okay, no, Paul Roma. Well, he's a pretty boy. She seems to think she's a pretty girl, so... But speaking of pretty, I'm going to have to go with Jeff Jarrett. When he had his long, curly, blonde hair? Yeah. She reminds me of Jeff Jarrett. Give her a fucking guitar, she'd be rocking. Well, let's move on to the fourth and final member. That will be Marina Shafir. Now, she's not in the UFC at the moment. She's mainly been fighting amateur, but that has a lot to do with her weight class. There's not much fights out there for her, so she has just transitioned to pro. But I've watched some footage on this woman here, Derek, and she's ruthless. Like, just totally reminds me of Ronda Rousey. She's like a fucking beast, Derek. She really is. Judo, damn, it's right. Well, I wouldn't say it's up there with Ronda's, but it's not far off, Derek. If you was going to put Ronda Rousey's judo as a number 9, you've got to put this girl's as number 8. Have you seen a fight, Derek?
No, I have not. I was going to watch one of her fights, but I didn't ever get around to it. Is she worth watching, Greg?
Oh, yeah. I would say to any listeners, please just check her out. Marina Shafir. This girl is nasty. She really, really is. Her nickname is the Supernova from Moldova. She's got a record, an amateur record of 5 wins, no losses, and her current pro record is 1 win, 0 losses. Now, all her amateur bouts have been finished by submission victory, and 4 of them were by armbar. Pro victory was by armbar submission victory. So 5 of her 6 fights have finished by armbar submission victory. Now, that in itself tells you we've got Ronda Rousey 2 here, Derek. Now, I was watching a stand-up here, Derek. She needs a little bit of work on a stand-up, but she's training with Edmond Tarverdyan. Now, he'll certainly sharpen her up on her stand-up skills. So I think if Edmond works with this girl full-time, she puts the work in, there's no reason why she can't be the next Ronda Rousey. She's at 145 pounds. Now, I'm looking at this here, Derek. I think she'll be a good fight for Cyborg. We know Cyborg's calling for a fight with Ronda. What about taking out the young prodigy here? What do you think about that one, Derek?
Absolutely. If the UFC isn't going to sign Cyborg, have her fight this chick at 145.
If you owned a company outside the UFC, now, why wouldn't you make this match? It's, the story writes itself.
Yes, and honestly, if they start making that 4 horsewomen thing, they could even help market it. You could have one of Ronda Rousey's 4 horsewomen versus Ronda Rousey's biggest threat, and you can market it as that. And if Cyborg knocked this chick out, Ronda Rousey's gonna be begging for that fight in the UFC.
There we go. Like, Invicta could make this fight. Like, Dana White has got ties with Invicta. There's no reason, Invicta have not had they've not staged an event for a long time since losing a lot of their strawweight fighters. Now, Invicta have been concentrating on the 145 division. Cyborg's the champion there. Let Marina fight for the belt. 145. Makes sense to me.
I think this is kind of like the Brock Lesnar thing, though, where you'd have this chick with 1-0 record getting a fight that she probably doesn't deserve yet. She might have to win once or twice, or even 5 more times before you can start arguing that she deserves a title shot.
But the way I see it here, Derek, it's going to be Ronda Rousey and Marina Shafir continuing the 4 horsewomen for the next few years, because I believe Jessamyn Duke and Shayna Baszler, they won't be a part of that faction in about a year's time. Maybe Shayna Baszler will hang on for 2 years, but obviously when you get cut from the UFC, you're not making much money, nobody wants you, you're not going to go training, you can't afford to go training with these guys. It just depends, will she run her own classes there, but I believe it's mainly Edmond's gym, so could she make a living there? I just don't think so, especially not Jessamyn Duke.
If Ronda Rousey's that good of friends with these girls, she makes a lot of money. She might just front the bill for them to train there. She might just pay for them all to keep training there.
That's a good point. That really is. I just don't see it, though. I see new members come in. I really do. The next couple of years, you're watching the pro wrestling, they get new members, they lose members, they turn on members. It could even get pretty catty, too. Well, let's move on to the man behind the women, and that is Edmond Tarverdyan. Now, not many people knew about Edmond before the Ultimate Fighter 18, but once he went on there and he did his shit with Caraway, threatened to kill Caraway. Apparently, he even slapped Caro Parisian recently for some comments Caro made about Ronda and Edmond's relationship with Ronda. Now, the thing with Edmond is he loves these ladies, do you know what I mean? He lives for these women. You saw him with Caraway, he took that shit personal. So that's what you really want from a coach, Now, apparently I think he's the head coach and he's the striking coach for these ladies, so he can improve a lot of their striking, especially Marina's and especially Ronda Rousey. Give these women a good striking coach. Awesome. Now, as it goes for him being a tactician and a head coach, there's a video I seen of Gegard Mousasi sparring with Ronda, and Edmond was, he was taking that serious. He was shouting out moves. He wanted Ronda to get up, So it shows the sort of talent he's bringing in to spar with Ronda, and he wasn't letting her give up an inch. It's like he believed that she could out-grapple Gegard Mousasi. That's the level this guy pushes these women to. So he hasn't got the reputation of a Greg Jackson yet, or like a Ken Shamrock or a Pat Miletich. But a couple of years' time, he could have that name. Would you agree with me?
I actually just watching Ronda Rousey for the, pretty much since she started fighting, I've seen her fight live. Her second pro fight for Hard Knocks, I actually was there live. So I've seen one of her earlier fights and seeing how she's evolved even just in these few years. I think Edmond's a really good coach. I think when people start realizing this, he's going to be really popular really fast.
Well, discuss about, rivalries we've seen in pro wrestling. There was the NWO against the Four Horsemen. There was Dusty Rhodes. You've always had the baby faces facing off against the heel team and the Four Horsemen. So let's have a look at who could face off against these women. Now, we touched upon Chris Cyborg. She'd be a good one. But we've had Beth Correa recently. She just beat Jessamyn Duke. But she didn't stop there. She actually, she latched onto this Four Horsewomen thing. And she's riding it all the way. And I think she beats Shayna Baszler next. And I think she gets the title shot. So what is good for these women is also bad, because it sort of sets them on a fast track to Ronda Rousey's title. But then again, this means Ronda Rousey might get easier opponents, because instead of fighting the top talent in the division who really deserves it, just because they beat her cronies, they actually get a title shot. So it sort of benefits Ronda Rousey in a way. Would you agree?
Yes, but honestly, if this chick that's fighting Shayna Baszler next gets a title shot after beating Baszler, I'll puke. That would be the most undeserving title shot in so long. That beating a nobody and getting a title shot, that would be so sad.
Now I've just got her details up here, Derek. She's got a record of 8-0. The only knock on her record I can see is she's got 7 victories via decision. Now, that's not going to help her when it comes to a title shot, really. Personally, I can see her getting a title shot if she does defeat Shayna Baszler. But the interesting thing here, Derek, is she's actually started her own group, so she's riding it even further. She's not just taking them on her own. She's actually created her own group. They're called the Jaguars, which I want to just delve into this a second. Let me just get the group up. It's Chris Cyborg. Pretty obvious one there. No surprise to see her part of that group. Obviously Beth Correa. I'm assuming she's the leader, but with Cyborg in there being a big name, that's quite debatable. Jessica Andrade, that makes sense. She's a very good bantamweight fighter in the UFC rankings. And Claudia Gadelha, she's a strawweight. I don't know what she's going to bring to the table, but 3 of those opponents could face some of the Four Horsewomen. But Claudia Gadelha, she's the only one who can't really fight them. So, yeah, looks like a legit rivalry here, Derek. What do you make of it?
Honestly, I think the 4 Jaguars are considerably better. Jessica Andrade would knock out Shayna Baszler and Jessamyn Duke pretty easily. And, Cyborg and Ronda Rousey, to me, that's a toss-up. That fight could go either way. But yeah, the 4 Jaguars, that's definitely, they got better members for sure.
Looks like they got some stiff competition here, Derek. Now, I mentioned Claudia Gadelha. She can't fight these women, but obviously that's a good training partner to have. She trains with Renan Barreau and Josie Aldo, so that just tells you her talent level. She was probably the favourite to go into the Ultimate Fighter 20. She didn't go in because she had weight cutting issues. She couldn't cut weight in such a short space of time. She could possibly move up. I think she might be a bit too small for bantamweight, to be fair. But you never know. How that might pan out. It's what, 20 pounds difference?
Yeah, 20 pounds.
If she bulked up and added a little bit more muscle, because she's very trimmed, 6-packed a lot. So maybe she just put a bit of... She could do it, I suppose. So you never know in the future. She might move to bantamweight. That's very interesting. Do you know, I bet the UFC must be... Well, Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta must be rubbing their hands thinking, whoa, damn. Because since they lost Brock Lesnar, they've not had nothing like this, in my personal opinion anyway. Sort of like this pro wrestling sort of style. Do you know where you got this, like Brock Lesnar, who's a character. Everyone wanted to see him, win or lose, they hated on him. Now, you've obviously got you got your best fighters. Everybody wants to watch the best fighters fight, but it was something special when Brock Lesnar was fighting. I believe they got this back now with this little rivalry, team versus team. They do this on the... They must spend millions to do this on the Ultimate Fighter. Now they're getting this stuff for free. Literally. Fucking awesome. Okay, that's the end of the show there, Derek. Thanks for joining me again.
Anytime, Greg.
Okay, from MMA Crypt Fighting Talk, thank you for watching.